Welcome to a basic video on operations with numbers, integers, and fractions. These are just some fundamental ideas or concepts to help you get started in your algebra class, whatever that may be. So yeah, stay tuned. So let's talk about the basic operations that you've used probably in just about every grade level up until high school, as you've dealt with these four operations: addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. Now, when you get to algebra, and at the high school level especially, most of your problems will be in word format. Math is a language, and you're going to have word problems, and you're going to have to understand what operation is being asked of you. Okay, so let's see if we can kind of match some of these common terms up. So look at the word product. Product implies that two things are being multiplied together. So if you're asked to find the product of 3 and 4, that means to multiply. Quotient's kind of an unusual word. Quotient refers to division. If you're asked what is the quotient of x and 3, that means x divided by 3. Sum or total of things, often you hear in algebra the word combine these two. That generally means to add things together. And to find the difference between two things, you're going to subtract them from each other. Now, you're also going to have to deal a lot with integers in algebra. All the numbers you would see on the number line, both positives and negatives. And you have to be real careful. Sometimes they can be confusing with how to add or subtract them. And we'll talk about how to do it in a calculator later on in this video. The word combine, if you ever hear that, it usually means to add them together. Well, this first particular question up here says to add 4 plus 8. Now, that's pretty straightforward, not that tricky. That gives you 12. Next question says to take 9 and subtract 2. Now, in math terms, this is also taking a 9 and adding a negative 2. Keep that in mind because you'll hear it said that way sometimes. Either way you look at it, 9 minus 2 gives you 7. 10 minus 14. This is like taking $10 and then taking away $14. Well, you're not going to have a positive number of dollars left. If you take $10 and you subtract $14, you are now in the hole $4. So the answer to that one is negative 4. Moving on, negative 3, and then take 4 more away from it. So you're already in the hole $3. You owe somebody $3. Now you're taking 4 more away. Now you should be in the hole a larger amount. Okay. Anytime when you're doing addition and subtraction, if you have two negatives, meaning you're subtracting a negative number, those two sort of cancel out to become a positive number. So this reads 10 minus a negative 2. It actually is 10 plus 2, which means 12. And the last one, like I said earlier, sometimes they view 20 minus 3 as adding a negative 3 to 20. Either case, this is really like saying 20, subtract 3 from it to give you positive 17. Okay? Moving on to multiplying integers, which sometimes can be confusing as well. If you look to the left on this page, I've got some of the basic rules. When you multiply a positive times a positive, you'll get a positive answer. When you multiply a negative number times a negative number, you also get a positive. So those are the two ways that you get a positive product from multiplying, is if they're both positive or they're both negative. Now, in some cases, you'll have to multiply a positive number times a negative number. That will result in a negative answer. And also, if you have a negative times a positive, it'll result in a negative. One way to think of it is if you're multiplying two things and one of them is negative, your result will be negative. Same thing's true for division. You divide a positive by a positive, it's a positive. Negative divided by negative is a positive. If either one of the numerator or denominator, but not both, is negative, then your resulting quotient will be negative. Let's look at some examples. In this case, notice this notation here. There is no x or multiply symbol between these two. It's just got a 4 and a parentheses 5. In algebra, that's often how they imply multiplication. 4 times 5 is a positive 20 because they're both positive. Negative 6 times 2 means there's 2 of them. There's 2 negative 6s, which multiplies to give you a negative 12. Negative 3 times negative 3, this is one of those situations where it's a negative times a negative, will be a positive 9. Continuing on, positive 10 divided by negative 5. Since only one of the two is negative, you know your answer is going to be negative, and 5 goes into 10 twice. And negative 1 divided by negative 1, this is one of those cases where they're both negative. Your resulting answer will be positive. Sometimes in algebra you will have to deal with fractions. Excuse me. Now, multiplying fractions is pretty easy to do. You simply multiply the numerators together and multiply the denominators together, simplify at the end. In this case, if you have 2/3 times 4/3, you multiply the numerators, 2 times 4 is 8, and you multiply the denominators, 3 times 3 is 9. Pretty straightforward. Most of the time you can do that in your head. It becomes a little more challenging when you're asked to add or subtract fractions. You may remember you have to find a common denominator, which means we need to convert this fraction into something to where they both have the same denominator. So if I'm looking at 1/5 plus 2/10, it pops in my head pretty quickly that I can convert 1/5 into something over 10 simply by multiplying it by 2 over 2. If I multiply this by 2 over 2, now it becomes 2 over 10. Okay, and if you notice, 2/10 now plus 2/10, since they both have a common denominator, it makes it easy to give you a result of 4/10. And the last thing I want to talk about in this video is how we can use our calculator to make some of this easier. Now, this particular calculator that we're using is a Casio FX9860G2. I highly recommend it. It's a great calculator to use, and it's what our particular school uses, so the kids are very used to this one. Most operations that you can do with integers can be done on the calculator if you type them in correctly and carefully. This one says 3 minus 14. Well, if you're not real sure, type it in exactly how it sounds, 3 minus 14, and it'll give you the answer of negative 11. Moving on, 6 times negative 3. Type it in exactly how it looks in the problem that you have, and the calculator does most of the thinking for you. Although this one looks a little more complicated, if you see a fraction, there is a fraction button that says A and then BC beside it. Everything on top can go in first. 6 minus parentheses a negative 2. Use the circle keypad navigator to drop to the bottom, and then type in 5 minus 4, and now it looks just like our problem. Hit enter, and our answer is 8. Dropping down to the fractions, I'm going to clear my screen so it's a little easier to see. 2/3 times 1/2. Now that we know that you multiply numerator and denominator, it's 2/6, which reduces to 1/3. But you can do this in your calculator if you're not sure. So hit the fraction button, 2 over 3. You'll need to navigate to the right in order to get the parentheses to do the next fraction, which is 1 over 2. And then you'll need to close the parentheses. Now that they look the same, boom, it automatically reduces that fraction for you. Remember how we got 2/6? 2/6 reduces to 1/3. And this is really where the calculator comes in handy, and that's when you're dealing with adding fractions. Instead of having to find a common denominator, as long as you type it in very carefully, the calculator will do the common denominator for you and make this operation much easier than before. All right, thank you for watching.